In the shimmering twilight of Orion Prime, neon lights floated like constellations across a tangle of walkways and metal spires, casting an otherworldly glow over the Grand Bazaar. The marketplace sprawled across the planet's largest spaceport, where merchants and mercenaries alike came to hawk star charts, alien spices, and contraband starship components. Overhead, grav carts hummed through the swirling haze, and exotic music drifted through the air as if played by invisible minstrels. The spice scent of roasted meats, pungent fruits, and chemical elixirs formed a heady cloud that pulled in even the most reluctant traveler. On that day, a former soldier named Darius Calderon, a man burdened by the weight of his past, stood at a noodle stall, sipping from a steaming bowl. He wore a long coat of reinforced fiber, its hem tattered by skirmishes on forgotten moons. His gaze, sharp and dark, searched the crowd for any sign of trouble, for in the bazaars of Orion Prime, trouble was never far. The hum of distant engines pulsed underfoot, while the barkers shouted in half a dozen languages, each voice competing for the attention and coin of passing customers. Suddenly, a whisper of unease slid down Darius's spine. A subtle shift in the crowd, an almost imperceptible hush, caught his ear. People parted as if an invisible force pushed them aside. Through the opening came a figure, hooded and small, gliding with urgency. Behind her stalked 5 black-clad enforcers, helmets gleaming under the neon lights, plasma batons at their sides. They moved with a practiced coordination that betrayed their lethal training. Darius watched them close and on the robed stranger, cornering her against a pillar of stacked cargo crates. A single plea for help rose from under that hood, but the crowd turned away, unwilling to involve themselves in the deadly business of specialized hunters. Darius, however, felt the old soldier's instinct flare within him. Without consciously deciding, he placed his half-eaten bowl on the vendor's counter. He stepped forward, weaving through the throng, his senses on high alert. A faint hum of electricity buzzed, and he caught sight of the enforcers raising their batons. The hooded figure glanced around desperately, her voice trembling. "Help, please, someone. Please." The last word cracked with fear, but also with regal determination. Darius strode forward, eyes narrowed, the scabbard at his hip clinking as he moved. "That's enough," he said, his voice echoing with authority. The nearest enforcer lashed out, baton sparking. Darius sidestepped in a fluid motion and delivered a precise blow to the back of the enforcer's helmet, sending him crashing to the ground. Another lunged forward, baton raised high. Darius ducked under the swinging arc and retaliated with a backhand strike to the attacker's jaw. The sound of cracking teeth and the enforcer's muffled groan resounded amid the onlookers. The remaining 3 paused, uncertain. Their gazes flicked from the fallen men to Darius's unwavering stance. A tense standoff held for a heartbeat, the electric hiss of the batons filling the silence. Then, with a collective snarl, they charged. Darius, a veteran of countless skirmishes, unleashed a blur of punches and kicks. The crowd gasped as, in mere moments, all 5 enforcers were out cold on the durasteel floor. Dusting himself off, Darius turned to the hooded stranger, who trembled against the cargo crates. "Are you hurt?" he asked, taking her by the elbow to guide her away from the crumpled forms of her pursuers. She looked up, and from beneath the hood, delicate features emerged, luminous violet eyes, silken silver hair that fell around a face too youthful and graceful for the harshness of Orion Prime. The woman seemed an otherworldly presence in a realm of hardened criminals and mercenaries. "Thank you," she said breathlessly, voice soft like a night breeze. "I thought they'd take me away." Darius peered at her uncertainly. "Those men. They didn't look local. What's going on here?" She clasped her hands together, eyes darting through the crowd. "I can't stay here. Others will come. Without warning, more black-clad soldiers appeared at the far edge of the bazaar, scanning the masses with hawk-like intensity. Darius's hand tightened around the woman's forearm. "Time to go," he muttered, and pulled her along a winding path through the labyrinth of stalls. They slipped past disinterested vendors, navigated hidden alleys, and eventually ducked into the shell of a ruined corridor leading to an abandoned platform. There, the whir of old ventilation fans echoed in the gloom. They crouched behind a rusted cargo container. The woman removed her hood, revealing regal poise despite her disheveled appearance. "I am Elara," she said quietly, violet eyes pleading. "Elara of Velmara." Darius, running a hand through his close-cropped hair, spoke in a steady, if weary, tone. "Darius Calderon. Used to serve in the Earth Defense Corps. Now I mostly do freelance security jobs." He exhaled, trying to make sense of the situation. "Velmara? I've heard that name. It's a planet in the Helix Nebula region, right?" She nodded quickly, words tumbling from her lips as if she feared they might be silenced. Yes, it was once peaceful, but since the overthrow, everything has changed. My family, my world, they're under the iron grip of General Kael. He has technology, armies, and now, apparently, bounty hunters to capture me. Darius raised an eyebrow. So you're a refugee from some tyrant? He asked, noticing how her posture and tone hinted at far more than mere refugee status. I am the rightful heir, she replied, swallowing a sob. Princess Elara Velmara, exiled. Kael seized power in a sudden coup, and he's bent on solidifying his rule. My escape is the only thing that keeps a glimmer of hope alive for those who still resist. Darius let out a low whistle. You're an exiled princess, and I just got myself tangled up in your royal trouble. She placed a trembling hand on his. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this, but you've already saved me once. I beg you. I need help more than you can imagine. I have to get back to Velmara to free my people, or at least inspire them to fight back. Darius felt a familiar pang in his chest, a memory of lost comrades and shattered ideals from his own wars. He gazed at Elara, seeing both desperation and determination. He wanted to say no, to walk away, but the look in her eyes, those violet eyes shimmering with tears, made him hesitate. I'm no hero, he said gruffly. I'm just a man trying to stay alive. You've done more than most, she replied softly. If you turn your back on me, Kael's hunters will capture me for sure. The silence stretched. The ventilation fans groaned somewhere in the darkness, and the faint chatter of the bazaar drifted through the corridor. Darius finally sighed. Fine. I'll get you somewhere safe, at least. Let's move before more of them come. She exhaled with relief, tears brimming but not falling. Thank you, Darius. Thank you. They made their way to a dimly lit docking bay at the outskirts of the spaceport, where Darius's personal craft rested, a small, rugged freighter once used for quick extractions and armed recon flights. Inside, the cargo hold had been converted into a modest living space, complete with cots, supply crates, and a battered metal table. The cockpit was cramped, lined with flickering consoles and overhead compartments stuffed with gear and old field manuals. An acrid smell of burnt thrusters hung in the air, a testament to the ship's many close calls. Elara ran her hands along the metal walls, eyes betraying curiosity. This is homey, she offered. Darius managed a thin smile. It's not the royal palace, but it can handle jumps through half the galaxy without falling apart, usually. We'll be safe here for a while, as long as we keep a low profile. A pang of guilt flooded him. He knew that getting involved in political struggles could cost him dearly, but something about Elara's plight, about the unwavering hope she carried, felt like a cause worth fighting for. It reminded him of a time when he believed in fighting for freedom. They passed the first hours in uneasy planning, discussing routes off Orion Prime, the best ways to avoid detection, and possible safe harbors. Darius's old contacts might offer discreet star lanes, or sell forged identification codes for a hefty price. All the while, Elara explained more about Velmara's plight, about General Kael's tyranny. She described how Kael had once been a trusted general under her father, King Raelon, but had grown power-hungry. With cunning strategy, Kael convinced certain noble houses to betray the throne, orchestrating an ambush in the royal city. Elara recounted, voice trembling, how she escaped the palace with the aid of loyal guards. Many of her family were captured or killed that night. Now, Kael ruled through fear, employing advanced weaponry that dwarfed anything Velmara had ever possessed. Darius listened, reliving his own nightmares of war. I've seen tyrants before, he said grimly. They take everything and give nothing but misery in return. Elara's eyes shimmered as she met his gaze. Which is why I can't just hide forever. My people need hope that one day Velmara will be free again. Darius nodded. If you plan on overthrowing a regime, you'll need more than hope, he said. You need allies, resources, and a strategy. She held a stare. Will you help me? Truly help me do this. He hesitated, the memory of the enforcers, of the lethal skill they displayed, weighing on him. Then, recalling how quickly he dispatched them, he felt a silent stirring of confidence. You'll need someone who knows how to fight, he said simply. I guess I'm in. A tiny smile broke across her features. Thank you, Darius, from the bottom of my heart. In that moment, a partnership was forged between the ex-soldier and the exiled princess, though neither knew the trials that awaited them. Days turned into weeks as Darius and Elara made careful plans. Orion Prime, for all its corrupt flamboyance, was a hub of information. Between shady deals and clandestine meetings with smugglers, they cobbled together intelligence on Kael's network of spies and the hidden outposts loyal to the old royal family. In a dilapidated dive bar called the Crescendo Drift, Darius met with an old acquaintance, Garrick Quinn, a smuggler notorious for navigating uncharted wormholes. Garrick wore a perpetually amused grin, as though life were one big joke he refused to take seriously. "Darius," Garrick exclaimed, swirling a glowing drink in a tall glass. "Been a while since I had the pleasure of your company." His eyes flicked to Elara, who sat quietly at their booth. "And you brought a friend, I see." "She's the reason I'm here," Darius said, keeping his voice low. "We need to get to the Helix Nebula region." Quietly, Garrick's eyebrows rose. "Helix Nebula? That's a hot zone these days. Seems like half the mercenaries in this quadrant are headed there. Something about a big-shot general cracking down on rebels. Entire star lanes closed off." Elara spoke up, her voice carefully controlled. "We'll pay. We just need a route." Garrick regarded her for a long moment, an odd glint in his eye. Then he smirked. "Sure, I can help you out. But favors like these cost more than credits. Sometimes it's about the risk I'm taking, the heat I could draw." "We can handle the risk," Darius assured, ignoring the unease settling in his gut. "Just get us a route that can handle my freighter." Garrick leaned in, voice nearly a whisper. "There's an old jump gate near the Rimholt sector that still functions. Most folks think it's too unstable, but I've used it once or twice. If you know the right calibrations, it'll spit you out past Kael's main blockade lines, put you close to Velmara." Darius nodded thoughtfully. "Coordinates." The smuggler rattled off a string of numbers and wave frequencies, while Darius typed them into a small data pad. Garrick then gave him a second list of recommended modifications to the freighter's jump drive. "Just be careful," Garrick said. "That gate is old, prone to random surges. Power up at the wrong second, and you'll atomize in a pretty swirl of cosmic dust." Darius merely grunted. "We'll manage." Elara bowed her head in thanks, an elegant motion that made Garrick blink, as though he recognized something royal in her demeanor. Fortunately, he asked no questions, only accepted his payment. Soon, Darius and Elara slipped away, merging into the swirling crowds of Orion Prime once more. Back at the freighter, Darius got to work modifying the jump drive. Elara offered to help, though her mechanical skills were modest. He handed her a spanner and gestured to an open panel bristling with wires. "Follow my lead," he advised, trying to keep frustration from his voice as he crouched under the engine housing. Hours passed with the crackle of plasma torches and the hiss of coolant. Bit by bit, the ship's main systems were rewired to handle the precarious energy surges of the ancient jump gate. Sweating and exhausted, Elara curled up in the corner of the cargo hold to rest. Darius paused his work, noticing how her shoulders shook. He set down his tools, approaching softly. "Princess?" he ventured, voice gentler than usual. She looked up, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, wiping her eyes. I miss my home, my family. Everything was torn away so quickly." Darius exhaled, unsure how to console her. "We'll get you back," he said, placing a hand on her arm. "One step at a time." For a fleeting moment, they simply sat there, two kindred souls brought together by fate, each carrying burdens of war and loss. In those silent, shared sorrows, a bond formed that would only strengthen as their quest unfolded. The day came when the freighter, newly upgraded for the dangerous jump, soared away from Orion Prime's orbit. Elara stood in the cockpit, mesmerized by the swirling stars that stretched out in all directions, infinite pinpricks of light beckoning them onward. Darius, seated at the helm, checked and rechecked the instruments that tracked the jump gate's location. "Coordinates locked," he announced, voice calm but tense. "We should arrive at the gate in a few days, assuming no complications." Elara nodded, her posture as regal as any queen's. "And then we see if Garrick's intel is good, and if we don't fry ourselves in a jump anomaly." Beyond the safety of their hull, the cosmic sea shimmered. Dusty nebula clouds in the distance glowed faintly, and the unblinking eyes of distant suns watched over them. They sailed past asteroids and abandoned outposts, remnants of old trade routes that had once thrived in a calmer era. Occasionally, they encountered patrol ships scanning for contraband. Darius took pains to mask their signatures, using smuggler tricks gleaned from his days in the Earth Defense Corps. At last, they neared the remote region where the ancient jump gate drifted. A giant, ring-shaped construct emerged in the freighter's forward view, battered by time, pitted by micrometeorite impacts, and glowing faintly with flickers of residual energy. Its surface was etched with alien glyphs, swirling patterns that hinted at an origin older than any known empire. Darius's gaze darted from the gate to his console. We'll need to power up at the right moment. Initiate the jump precisely on the energy spike. Elara hovered anxiously beside him. Is there anything I can do? Strap in, he replied, flipping a series of switches. And pray to whichever gods you like. She gave him a quick nod, then clasped her harness. Darius ignited the thrusters, edging the freighter closer to the ring. Alarms beeped as stray energy spikes danced across the sensors. The swirling patterns on the gate shifted, forming a shimmering vortex in the center. Now, Darius shouted. He rammed the throttle, sending the freighter hurtling into the vortex. A deafening roar engulfed the cockpit, and the view screen burst with swirling lights of every hue. Elara pressed her eyes shut, feeling her body lurch as though pulled in a dozen directions at once. For a moment, she feared they were caught in an endless tunnel of chaotic energies. Then, with a jarring thud, the freighter tore back into normal space. The swirling maelstrom vanished from the view screen, replaced by the calm blackness of open starfields. We made it, Darius breathed, scanning the instruments. Elara opened her eyes, blinking in disbelief. Where are we? He pointed to a set of coordinates glowing on the console. We're in the Helix Nebula region, close to Velmara's system. Relief and elation spread across Elara's face. But just as she began to smile, the sensor alarm blared. Red lights danced across the console, indicating an incoming vessel on a direct intercept. Inbound ship, Darius muttered, trying to read the data. Vector suggests it's armed. Elara's heart sank. Kael's forces. Let's assume yes, he replied grimly, flipping the freighter's shields online. Buckle up. A sleek, black warship bore down on them, bristling with weapons. Over the comm, a harsh voice crackled. Unidentified vessel. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in immediate destruction. Elara's hands balled into fists. We can't let them board. They'll capture us. Darius nodded, eyes dark. We run. He angled the freighter sharply, hitting the thrusters at maximum burn. The black warship fired warning shots, blazing green pulses that seared the vacuum, but Darius's deft maneuvering let him dodge the brunt of the attack. For several harrowing minutes, they raced through drifting debris, spiraling around asteroids and hazard buoys. Despite the freighter's modifications, it couldn't outmatch a warship in raw speed. The enemy closed in, lasers grazing the shields, making them flicker dangerously. Darius cursed under his breath, pushing the engine to the limit. Then Elara leaned forward. Aim for that asteroid field, she said, pointing to a cluster of tumbling rocks lit faintly by a distant star. It's a gamble, Darius replied, voice tense, but we don't have a better idea. They dove into the swirling mass of asteroids, sensors blaring proximity alerts. The warship pursued, though it slowed to navigate the dense rock field. The freighter twisted and turned, scraping by near collisions. One boulder the size of a small city nearly smashed their hull, but Darius rolled the freighter at the last moment, dodging it by mere meters. Laser fire from the warship pelted some of the asteroids, shattering them into smaller fragments that pelted the freighter's shields like cosmic shrapnel. Darius gritted his teeth, weaving around every piece, while Elara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Finally, the black warship clipped a massive asteroid. Its starboard thrusters sparked, sending it spinning. The pilot regained control, but the delay was enough for Darius to slip away, racing deeper into the field. After several tense minutes, the sensors indicated the warship had broken off pursuit, likely deciding the chase was too risky. Slumping in his seat, Darius deactivated the alert sirens. We lost them. Elara unclenched her trembling hands. That was close. He gave her a wry grin. Welcome to the front lines. They emerged from the asteroid field days later, setting course for Velmara. Along the way, they detected encrypted signals from hidden outposts, rumored strongholds of the resistance. Elara's face lit up with hope at the mention of these havens. At last, they touched down on the rugged moon of Ashel, a place rumored to hide a group loyal to the royal family. The landing pad was built within a rocky canyon, shielded by natural formations from orbital detection. Upon exiting the freighter, Darius and Elara were greeted by a cadre of armed guards wearing mismatched armor. Their leader, a stern-faced Velmaran named Commander Soren, glared at the newcomers with distrust. "Elara," he gasped, recognizing the princess despite her dusty clothes. He bowed quickly, an action echoed by the guards. "Princess, we feared the worst. You live." She returned a small bow. "I owe my life to this man, Darius Calderon. He helped me evade Kael's hunters. Please, Commander, we need to speak with whoever is in charge." Soren gestured for them to follow, leading them through a maze of natural tunnels into a hidden facility teeming with activity. Worn-out technicians tended to battered vehicles, while soldiers sparred in makeshift training circles. The air crackled with the tension of an underground insurgency. In a central chamber illuminated by glow orbs, Elara and Darius were ushered before a council of 5 Velmarans. Their leader, an older woman with a scar across her cheek, rose to greet the princess. "I am High Counselor Elara," she said, voice shaking with emotion. "I served your father for many years, Princess Elara. Seeing you here, it is a miracle." Elara bowed respectfully. "Counselor, I've come to help free Velmara from Kael's tyranny. We may not have a grand army, but we have determination." Elara glanced at Darius, then back at Elara. "Princess, Kael's forces have grown. He has starships, advanced weaponry, and an iron grip on our cities. We've tried mounting small-scale resistance efforts, but each time, he crushes us. We have lost many brave souls." Darius stepped forward. "Then we need a new strategy. If you can show us the layout of Kael's strongholds, maybe we can hit him in places he isn't expecting." A flicker of hope lit Evara's eyes. "We've gathered intelligence on the palace city, on Kael's garrisons, but we lack a plan or a leader to unite us all." Elara's breath caught. "Then let me be that leader. Velmara is my home, my birthright. Together, we can rally those who still remain loyal to the crown." A hush fell across the chamber as every eye fixed on the princess. The weight of their desperation bore down on her. She felt the burden of responsibility, of living up to her father's legacy. Then, a smattering of cautious applause rose, slowly building into a wave of approval. Evara smiled through tears. "We stand behind you, Princess Elara." Over the next weeks, the hidden base on Ashel buzzed with renewed energy. Elara, drawing on her royal upbringing, worked with Evara and other counselors to streamline supplies, build alliances with neighboring outposts, and coordinate covert missions. Darius led combat training sessions, using his Earth Defense Corps experience to teach guerrilla tactics. Velmaran rebels had passion, but their fighting skills were often rudimentary. With disciplined drills and mock battles, Darius honed their instincts. He showed them how to use terrain to their advantage, how to strike swiftly and disappear, how to handle small arms with deadly precision. Many a night, Elara joined the training. She insisted on learning how to fight, not content to remain behind in safety while others risked their lives. Darius found her surprisingly determined, absorbing lessons in marksmanship and close-quarters combat with an intensity that mirrored her unwavering resolve. Between exercises, they pored over old star charts and infiltration plans. Scouts returned with updates on Kael's fortress, the royal palace that now served as his seat of power. It was surrounded by high walls, advanced energy shields, and regiments of loyal soldiers armed with alien tech. Overhead, Kael's warships patrolled the skies, ready to strike at the first sign of rebellion. Still, the seeds of a grand plan took shape. With new recruits trickling in from across Velmara's moons, the insurgents grew in number and confidence. Arms dealers sympathetic to the royal family discreetly supplied advanced weaponry, pulse rifles, shield generators, and even a few stolen plasma cannons. The once meager band of rebels transformed into a budding army of liberation. During this period, a bond of camaraderie formed between Darius and Elara, forged by shared hardship and nights of half-whispered confessions. She told him of her childhood in the palace, of festivals where the people danced under the twin moons, of the father she admired who taught her the virtues of kindness and justice. In return, Darius spoke of his past on Earth, of the wars he fought against alien incursions, of the day he lost dear friends in a doomed siege. The sorrow of those memories weighed heavily on him, but sharing them with Elara felt strangely liberating. After one grueling day of training, they sat atop a rocky outcrop overlooking the hidden base. The horizon glowed under the faint light of a distant sun. Darius stared at the silhouettes of training rebels below, feeling a mix of pride and dread. Elara watched him, a gentle question in her eyes. "You seem troubled." He let out a slow breath. "I just hope we're ready. Kael's forces are massive. Even with all our preparations, the odds aren't great." She laid a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We have something Kael can never match. The will of an entire world yearning to be free. And we have you." A rueful smile tugged at his lips. "I'm just one man. One man who has already made a huge difference," she countered, voice firm. "Your courage saved me, Darius. It has inspired these people more than you know." Touched by her words, he glanced away, uncertain how to respond. They sat in companionable silence until the sky faded into star-studded night, each lost in thoughts of what the morrow might bring. When the time came to launch their assault, tension ran high throughout the resistance. The plan was bold and fraught with danger. Smaller insurgent cells on neighboring moons would stage distractions, drawing Kael's warships away from the capital city, while Elara and Darius led a strike force to infiltrate the palace. In the pre-dawn gloom, the rebels boarded dropships, checked their weapons, and exchanged nervous words of encouragement. Darius surveyed their ranks, noticing how many of them wore determined, if anxious, expressions. These were farmers, merchants, scholars, men and women from all walks of life, united in their desire to free their homeland. Standing at the head of the assembly, Elara radiated calm authority. Clad in discreet combat gear, she still held the regal bearing of a true ruler. Counselor Yvara stepped forward and bowed. "Princess, we are with you. Let us restore Velmara," Elara declared, her voice carrying through the hush. "We fight not for revenge, but for the freedom to live without fear, for the hope that tomorrow will be brighter than today." Cheers rose from the rebels, the sound echoing through the stony canyons. Darius exchanged a final look with Elara before they boarded the lead dropship. Then the engines roared, and the makeshift fleet lifted into the pale sky, carrying the fate of an entire world. They soared across the dunes and crags of Velmara's surface, staying low to avoid detection by Kael's scanners. Ahead, the capital city's towers rose like jagged spears, ringed by walls and shimmering energy barriers. Smoke trailed into the sky, a sign that Kael's regime had not been idle in quelling dissent. By the time they reached the city outskirts, alarms were sounding, and searchlights swept the skies. The allied insurgent cells had launched their diversions elsewhere, luring away some of Kael's warships, but the palace defenses remained formidable. Anti-air lasers streaked through the air, forcing the dropships to maneuver wildly. "Keep steady," Darius barked, gripping the overhead rail. Elara stood beside him, face pale but resolute. Their pilot managed to descend behind a cluster of burnt-out buildings, setting down in a swirl of dust. The ramp dropped, and rebels rushed out, forming defensive lines. Gunfire crackled, and the roar of distant explosions thundered across the cityscape. Laser blasts flew overhead as Darius guided Elara behind a half-collapsed wall, returning fire at squads of Kael's troopers. The streets became a war zone. Rebel fighters, outnumbered but determined, ducked behind rubble, lobbing grenades that flared in brilliant arcs. Kael's troopers, clad in sleek armor, retaliated with disciplined volleys, searing the air with sizzling bolts. Step by step, the rebels advanced toward the palace gates, destroying shield generators along the perimeter. Darius's pulse pounded in his ears, each breath laden with dust and adrenaline. More than once, he glimpsed Elara standing tall amid the chaos, rallying frightened rebels to press on. Her presence electrified them, reminding all that they fought for the rightful princess. Finally, they reached the main gates. Massive durasteel doors sealed tight. Enemy fire from the battlements rained down, pinning the rebels. Darius spied a control node on a nearby platform, a console that likely governed the gate mechanisms. "I'll take a team and override it," he shouted, gesturing to a handful of fighters. Elara nodded, continuing to lay down covering fire with her pulse rifle. As Darius rushed across open ground, lasers sizzled by his ears. One beam grazed his shoulder, burning through his coat. He clenched his teeth against the pain and kept going. With practiced skill, he and his team scaled the platform. 2 guards sprang out to stop them, but Darius swiftly dispatched one with a well-placed shot, while a rebel fighter took down the other. The console fizzed and sparked under the rebels' hacking attempts. "Almost there," muttered the tech-savvy rebel, a young man with nimble fingers. He typed frantically, bypassing security protocols. A triumphant beep sounded. The colossal gates began to grind open, revealing the palace courtyard. Rebels whooped in victory, surging forward. Kael's troopers scrambled to mount a last-ditch defense, but the momentum was with the insurgents. Soon, the courtyard was a storm of energy bolts and shouting fighters. Darius joined Elara at the courtyard's edge, covering her as she advanced. Bodies littered the marble walkways, both rebel and trooper alike. Statues of Velmaran kings from centuries past towered overhead, their stone faces witnessing the desperate struggle. Then, the crackling hiss of a massive energy cannon tore through the air. A beam of blinding light slammed into the rebel flank, obliterating a squad. Screams and chaos followed. Atop the palace steps stood General Kael himself, clad in obsidian armor that glinted with malevolence. Beside him was a towering artillery piece, manned by his elite guards. Kael's voice boomed across the courtyard, amplified by speakers embedded in his armor. "You dare assault my palace? Surrender now, and perhaps I'll grant you a quick death. But know this, Velmara is mine to rule, and no exiled princess will take it from me." Elara took a step forward, ignoring the swirling dust and the acrid smell of burnt ozone. "Kael," she shouted, voice carrying surprising force. "Your tyranny ends here. I claim this palace by my birthright, and for the people of Velmara." A mocking laugh echoed from Kael. "Still naive, little princess? Witness my power." At his signal, additional squads of black-armored soldiers poured into the courtyard, forming a rigid line behind him. The rebels, battered and shaken, huddled behind fragments of wall, unsure how to proceed under the threat of that massive cannon. Darius clenched his fists, adrenaline spiking. They were so close, yet confronted with Kael's show of force, the tide could easily turn. Elara, shoulders squared, looked to him. "We must push forward," she whispered, voice trembling but resolute. He nodded, forming a quick plan with the rebel officers. Some would flank left, drawing fire away from the main entrance, while others, armed with heavy plasma charges, would attempt to disable Kael's cannon. Elara insisted on taking the center approach with a contingent of fighters, aiming to reach Kael directly. The battle erupted anew, lasers and plasma shells crisscrossing the courtyard in a deadly ballet of light. Troopers fell on both sides, their cries lost in the relentless thunder of weapons. Guided by Darius's battle-hardened tactics, small groups of rebels dashed from cover to cover, gradually inching closer to the palace steps. Elara found herself in the thick of it, firing her pulse rifle at oncoming troopers. Her heart hammered, fear mingling with a fierce determination. She thought of her father, her people, the life she once knew. Every shot echoed her resolve to reclaim Velmara. Darius, weaving through the chaos, spotted a cluster of troopers protecting the cannon. He lobbed an explosive charge that detonated with a thunderous boom, scattering the defenders. Another rebel seized the moment to dash forward and disable the weapon's power couplings. Sparks flew, and the massive gun sputtered, losing its lethal brilliance. A triumphant cheer arose from the rebels as they sensed Kael's advantage dwindling. But the general merely hissed in anger, drawing a sword-like weapon crackling with energy. With startling swiftness, he vaulted off the cannon platform, landing in the courtyard amid his men. He pointed the weapon at Elara. "Princess, you have led these fools to their demise. I will cut you down, then make an example of all who followed you." She stared him down. "Your reign ends today," she fired back, mustering all the courage within her. "Brave words." Kael sneered and lunged. Elara barely blocked his strike with her rifle, the impact jolting her arms. Darius rushed to her aid, engaging Kael in a furious exchange of blows. Sparks danced with each clash of Kael's energy sword against Darius's own blade. a relic from his Earth defense days that glimmered with an adaptive plasma edge. Despite the general's imposing size, Darius held his ground, fighting with a practiced agility that came from years of combat. Elara circled around, firing at troopers who tried to flank them. The rebels seized the advantage, launching a final push against the palace defenders. Yet Kael proved a fearsome opponent. His sword strikes crackled with raw power, forcing Darius to constantly shift, parry, and counter. Grim determination marked the general's face, as though nothing else existed but the deadly dance with his adversary. At one critical moment, Kael disarmed Darius with a powerful strike, sending his plasma blade skittering across the courtyard. Elara cried out as Kael raised his sword for a killing blow. In the split second before the blade fell, Darius unleashed a hidden wrist blaster, firing point-blank into Kael's armor. A burst of energy flared, staggering the general. He reeled back, armor smoking from the impact. Darius scrambled to retrieve his fallen blade. Kael, enraged, charged again, but Elara slid in, ramming the butt of her rifle into his helmet with all her strength. Kael snarled, turning his sword on her, but Darius intervened, hooking the general's arm and forcing the blade aside. The sound of the rebels' final surge filled the courtyard. Kael's troopers, overwhelmed, began to retreat, some throwing down their weapons in surrender. Sensing defeat, Kael unleashed one last, desperate flurry of strikes, forcing Darius back a step. But then, a chorus of rebel gunfire hammered Kael's position. The general stumbled, dropping to a knee, his armor riddled with scorching holes. Elara stepped forward, breathing hard. She stared down at the wounded tyrant, who glared back in hatred. You think this is over? Kael spat, blood seeping from his lips. Others will rise to claim Velmara. She lifted her rifle, chest heaving. They'll have to go through me, and through all who stand for freedom. With that, Kael coughed, collapsing onto the blood-stained marble. His life ebbed away, leaving behind the echoes of his final, bitter rasp. A hush blanketed the courtyard, broken only by the ragged breathing of the rebels. Slowly, cheers began to rise, mixed with sobs of relief and grief for those lost. Counselor Yvara, limping from a wound, approached Elara and Darius, tears running down her cheeks. "It's over," she whispered, voice trembling. "Velmara is free." Elara closed her eyes, tears slipping past her lashes. She felt Darius's hand, warm on her shoulder, steadying her. Around them, rebels embraced, tossed aside shattered weapons, and knelt in reverence for the fallen. The rising sun bathed the palace steps in golden light, as though heralding the dawn of a new era. In the days that followed, celebrations rippled through the capital and beyond. News of Kael's defeat spread quickly. Many of his remaining garrisons capitulated without further bloodshed, realizing the cause was lost. Velmara's people emerged from their hiding places, their tears of relief and joy flooding the streets. Elara was officially crowned amidst the ruins of the old throne room, a solemn yet hopeful ceremony attended by thousands. She wore a simple coronet, a symbol of unity rather than opulence, and pledged to rebuild Velmara as a realm guided by compassion and justice. Thunderous applause and cheers filled the grand hall, echoing the hopes of a populace that had waited so long for deliverance. When the ceremony concluded, Darius found himself on a palace balcony overlooking the city. Reconstruction efforts were already underway, with laborers clearing debris and architects laying plans for revitalized infrastructure. The sight warmed his heart, yet he couldn't shake the sense of being an outsider. His mission was nearly complete. He leaned on the rail, staring at the cityscape, lost in thought. Footsteps approached, and he turned to see Elara in her newly tailored royal attire. A modest gown accentuating her regal posture, though it retained practical elements that hinted at her warrior spirit. "Are you leaving?" she asked gently, as if sensing his turmoil. Darius nodded, looking away. "My role here is done. You have your throne, your people have their freedom. I'm just a soldier. I was never meant to stay." Elara's voice was soft. "You could stay, if that's what you want. I know my people would honor you as a hero." A faint, sad smile tugged at his lips. "I appreciate that, but I've never been much for thrones and ceremonies. Besides, there's a whole galaxy out there and plenty of folks who need a helping hand. I guess I can't stay in one place too long." She reached out and took his hand, her gaze earnest. You've given me more than you realize, Darius. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me courage in the face of overwhelming odds. And you helped restore my faith that kindness and compassion still thrive, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. He squeezed her hand gently. You'll be a great ruler, Elara. Better than Kael ever was, or could be. They remained like that for a moment, the warmth of their bond lingering in the hush. Then she released him, regal composure returning. You'll always have a home here, should you wish to return, she said, voice steady. Darius gave her a respectful bow. Thank you, Your Highness. I'll remember that. A week later, under the brilliance of Velmara's twin moons, Darius boarded his trusty freighter. The palace courtyard, once a battlefield, was now a bustling center of rebuilding efforts. Crowds gathered to see him off, cheering and waving banners of the new, free Velmara. Elara herself stood at the edge of the platform, flanked by Ivara and the rebellion's other leaders. Darius took one last look at the world he had helped liberate. A sense of quiet satisfaction warmed his heart. He felt the subtle twinge of regret at saying farewell to Elara, but also the unspoken promise that if destiny willed, their paths might cross again. The freighter's engines roared to life, lifting him skyward amidst swirling dust. Watching from below, Elara felt a twist of emotion, gratitude, sadness, and a budding resolve to honor what he had fought for. As the ship vanished into the starry expanse, a sense of renewal filled her. Velmara's future glistened with promise. There would be challenges ahead, remnants of Kael's tyranny to undo, wounds to heal, and a planet to unite under a new banner of peace. But Elara held the unwavering conviction that with determination and compassion, her people could forge a brighter destiny. Meanwhile, Darius Calderon charted a course through unknown star systems, an ex-soldier once haunted by his past, now carrying the hope of a free Velmara in his heart. In the quiet hum of his cockpit, he looked out on the infinite tapestry of stars and smiled, thinking of a silver-haired princess and the world he had helped save. Beyond the horizon, endless possibilities awaited. Perhaps he would find new battles to fight, new innocence to protect. Yet, as he soared through the cosmic night, one certainty lit his path, a single truth forged by courage and sacrifice. Even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, a light of hope can shine, guided by those willing to stand up and fight for what is right. And so, with hearts liberated and spirits unbroken, the story drew to its close, not in solemn finality, but in the radiant dawn of a new chapter, one where an exiled princess, now crowned, ruled a free people, and a wandering soldier, once burdened by war, found renewed purpose. The tyrant had fallen, the people rejoiced, and Velmara stood poised on the threshold of peace, its twin moons illuminating a bright, hopeful future. Indeed, in the tapestry of the cosmos, few stories end more happily than the day a world is freed from the darkness of oppression, and a noble heart is restored to its rightful place upon the throne.